What's going on, everybody? David Eickholt and Sean Bock here for 24/7 Sports and HawkeyeInsider.com. First live stream of the year I think we've ever done. We're hoping that's going to be something we're going to continue to utilize moving forward. But no better time, I guess, Sean, than right now with Iowa men's basketball, with all the hype around it. The conference schedule has officially been unveiled. I'll shoot it to you first, man, just for some live reaction. The only thing I'll say right away is they were not kind of introducing Ben McCollum to Big Ten play, especially in the early going.
No, that trip to East Lansing is definitely not going to be kind. And then you follow it up against you end up going back home to Iowa City to take on Maryland. And while Maryland's got their question marks this year, they should have a pretty good and, defensive oriented team that, has some talent in the backcourt and, has some size and athleticism as well. So definitely not and then, to top that, I mean, you play Iowa State then a few days later after Maryland, and then you have a few bye games. And then you take on UCLA once Big Ten play starts back up again. And UCLA with Donovan Dent, New Mexico transfer Donovan Dent, one of the best point guards in the country. That's going to be an awesome, awesome point guard matchup between Bennett Sturts and Donovan Dent in Iowa City on January 3rd. So, yeah, it's definitely not a fun start to the Big Ten slate if you're Iowa, especially with some of the two play opponents that you got. I mean, Nebraska, that's one that I think works well in your favor. Granted, Nebraska should be better than last year. It's going to be fun to see, Bryce Sanford come back to Iowa City, how he's kind of greeted by the Iowa fan base. But then I said with Maryland too, they have their question marks, obviously, with new head coach Buzz Williams. But that's still a pretty athletic and pretty strong team for the most part. I mean, they bring in Indiana transfer Miles Rice, have a couple guys from Texas A&M, Solomon Washington, Pharrell Payne, bring in a couple guards too who are pretty talented. One of them being Darius Adams, who was a top 20 guard in the 2025 class. So, they still have their question marks, but they should be a pretty solid team in the Big Ten, at least kind of maybe being on that, fringe NCAA tournament team. And then having Purdue as one of your two play opponents. That's obviously not ideal with Purdue being as talented as they are. But once again, it's going to be a pretty exciting matchup to see how Sturts matches up with guys like Braden Smith and Foster Loyer. But, obviously Purdue is much more than those two guys, having Trey Kaufman-Renn and Oscar Clough as well on the inside. So, yeah, those two-play matchups are, it's not the worst draw. I think Maryland and Nebraska are definitely two beatable teams, road and home. Purdue, I think you could still match up decently well with Purdue, but, man, they got some size and they should have some improved depth this year too. So, yeah, those two play opponents are, it's not the worst draw, but it could be better, more so just because you have Purdue in there.
And I'd also, I brought up the first couple of games, obviously at Michigan State on December 2nd, then you host Maryland, but then you go down the list a little bit, Sean, there's a brutal kind of 6-day stretch where you're hosting Illinois, and I'm happy that, Illinois is going to be able to come back to Carver Hawkeye. It's been a couple of years, feels like, since then. And then they go at Purdue and at Indiana, which is going to be a really, really kind of fun matchup there. But again, that's a lot of talent in a very short window of time. And, it'll be interesting to see how this team progresses through the year. I mean, we know Ben McCollum's a guy that really doesn't he's so improvement driven, and he probably loses a lot of sleep at night when he loses games. He's kind of talked about how, we've seen him in action too, I think, at this point. But, I guess there's no better welcome to the Big Ten than that stretch. And I'm really curious when it comes to that kind of Darren DeVries and Ben McCollum coaching matchup at Assembly. I do wish they found a way to get Indiana at Iowa this season. I think there was kind of a missed opportunity, but I guess that kind of ramps up the anticipation for next year. But, Sean.
Yeah, one other thing with that schedule that you mentioned. So you have Illinois at Purdue, at Indiana. Then you play Rutgers at home. Then you have a bit of a break. You have a week. Yep. Then you play USC. USC is going to be a much more talented team than last year. Have more shooting. They have more athleticism. They're a big, big group too. It's a pretty different roster than last year, that USC team, but they should be a really, really good team. And then you have Oregon you host Oregon, right? Or no, it's at Oregon. Okay, so you host USC, excuse me. You
Yes.
host USC, which still should be a really tough matchup. And then you have those two back-to-back games. You have another like West Coast trip going to Oregon and then Washington on the road. Oregon brings back Nate Biddle and Sheffield, that point guard who is a really good shooter, really good player. Really good off the bounce as well. Once again, a really, really fun matchup at the point guard position for Iowa in that game. And then you go up against Washington, where I know Washington was at the bottom of the Big Ten last year, but Danny Sprinkle has brought in a very new roster from the transfer portal, which is kind of where he's made his living a little bit throughout his time up there in Seattle. And that should be a really, fun matchup as well, I think, with a couple of guys that they brought in. And should be a pretty tough stretch for this Iowa team. That's really a brutal stretch, honestly, I think. I mean, you have Rutgers, but, some of those other matchups where you have to go on the road, I mean, Indiana and Purdue back-to-back is not going to be easy. Then having Oregon and Washington where, obviously Oregon is in Washington, but or Oregon is in Purdue, but Oregon should have a pretty good team with the guys that they have coming back this year. And then Washington should be a step improved as well. It's going to be really fascinating to see how they kind of handle that.
It's kind of nice, though, too, Sean, that there's actually going to be some weekend games this year because we know how Frey McCaffrey felt about the lack of weekend games that Iowa had. And just going over some notes, like Iowa is going to play 6 weekend home games throughout the year. Not just I'm not talking Big Ten play, but through the season. I mean, they get 3 on Sunday and 3 on Saturday. And, you talk about wanting to build that home court advantage. I think that's one of the first things Ben McCollum talked about. He wanted to get Carver Hawkeye kind of, revved up and juiced up again. And back when he was a kid, coming to visit Carver Hawkeye and watching all that, he wants to feel that same sort of energy. So I think that's a big deal from that regard. Iowa is playing on Super Bowl Sunday again for the 6th time in 7 years. Was kind of hoping they'd avoid that, but that's for selfish reasons, considering my team's looking pretty solid so far. But Sean, I know we got a couple more notes we want to talk about when it comes to the schedule, but I really want to think about this. Where are you at with this Iowa team just as a whole compared to maybe what we thought in the summer? I mean, the more we kind of heard behind the scenes, the more we've kind of gotten a chance to see how the rest of the Big Ten's going to shake out, to see how all these pieces are going to fit. I have my couple X factors and big things. I think Combs is going to be a major part of what Iowa's capable of doing, especially on offense this year in terms of moving Bennett Sturts off the ball. And because they don't want to run pure point this year, and with his efficiency numbers, you really can't blame them either. Thought Trey Thompson was a massive get, but the more I kind of analyze this team and assuming that McCollum's style of play is going to translate to Big Ten, where are you kind of at with Iowa? Because I'll say, man, I like them a little bit more than I did maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, it's hard to really wage that. I mean, it's a positive because you see how that Drake team performed against high major teams last year. And while they weren't like the pinnacle, I mean, they probably should have beaten Texas Tech had, Grant McCausland and Ben McCollum not been best friends. I think Drake may have been able to win that matchup, but like Texas Tech knew everything that Drake was running and like their offense. Like obviously it's a tough offense to really grasp because it's such a read and react, and there's really no way to like game plan for it. So they were kind of the ones that obviously didn't, scout. They just knew it. Like they kind of just knew how to defend it, knew how to go up against it, and like various defensive schemes too. So this is one of the things that excites me the most about this Iowa team is, yes, there are a lot of question marks about what this team is going to have. I mean, obviously we're going to look at Drake from last year, but now you have guys that are, a step up from Drake. You have Alvaro Folgueras instead of Abreu. You have, or some of the other guys at the forward spot. You have Brendan Housen instead of Mitch Muscari. And you have more depth too at that 3-4 spot. And I think obviously one of the things that's been talked about a lot is why did Ben McCollum and Drake play so slow last year? Because they didn't have enough shooting. They didn't have enough offensive players that they really felt like they could rely on. Like it felt like at times that it was really like kind of a 1 or 2 man game with Bennett Sturts and Mitch Muscari and Abreu as well. Like those were kind of the 3 guys that really ran things. Now it feels like you have multiple scorers that can make plays happen, can make plays off the bounce, and kind of be able to initiate offense, but also really defend well on the other side of the floor. And I just think having that depth too. I mean, we talk about how McCollum's teams really have a tight rotation or a tight bench. It's going to be really interesting to see how the minutes are allocated going into this year too, because it feels like you have 9 or 10, maybe 11 guys that can really compete for minutes this year, or at least compete for like being in the rotation. And that's something that they didn't seem to really have at Drake. Like it seemed like there was a really big drop off, be at that 7th or 8th spot. So with this team, I'm really fascinated to see how that's kind of allocated and how those minutes are. Obviously it's probably going to be matchup based too. And with like what I'm excited about with like kind of the change of just the program in general is McCollum's style and just like the way that he coaches. Iowa's going to be a better matchup, or how should I say this? They are going to match up better against other teams more often compared to Fran McCaffrey and how those teams were.
I agree.
Because those teams were the last couple of years especially, like it was so offensive oriented, and it was so like, okay, the way you're going to, like, they can win games if they shoot, I don't know, they hit 12 or 13 3-pointers in a game, whatever.
They won by outscoring them. There was no alternative to win.
Let me finish my point.
Go for it.
This feels like they're going to be able, this team is going to be able to win games in different ways. And I think that's going to be really valuable come Big Ten season, because, you're not going to have your shots. You're not going to have your offense every day or every night you go on the road, or even nights you in Iowa City. And to be able to play defense and be able to excel on that side of the floor, not just defensively, but I think also doing some of the little things too, like, rebounding is going to be really important. But then again, that's not really going to be an effort thing, like, because that this team is going to play hard, and that they're going to work to rebound. Same thing on the defensive end. But do they have the bodies to rebound? Do they have the size to rebound? I mean, I don't think the Big Ten is as like true like massive fives or like front court guys, or like true 5 players, as opposed to like other years. But there are still some like teams where you're going to go up against some pretty big size. I mean, teams like Oregon, teams like Illinois, Indiana, like those are just 2 that come. I mean, USC is going to be big and physical. But I just think the ability to scheme and be able to beat teams in different ways, other than just relying on putting up 100 points, hitting 14 threes, being able to defend, being able to, pick out matchups. This Iowa staff, like, I know, like, it's a new staff, like new era, like, everything's shiny, everything's glitz and glam. But man, let me tell you, this staff knows how to game plan for an opponent. They know how to pick out their spots. They know how to pick their matchups. They know how to see it. It's just a matter of execution and things going in their way, because I'm telling you, I really think from a matchup standpoint, from a schematic standpoint, that Drake team like could have potentially been like a late second weekend team. Like maybe like if they hadn't played Texas Tech, they probably would have went on a much like longer, like they could have won at least 2 more games, in my opinion, just because, you saw what they did against Missouri. They bottled those guys up. And that's what I think they're going to be able to do in the Big Ten, or at least, and they have more skill and more, personnel that I think can elevate them to a higher level. It's just a matter of like, okay, can you do that on a nightly basis in the Big Ten? And, obviously the NCAA tournament is so matchup based, but the Big Ten is kind of the same thing in a way, but it's a much more physical conference too. How can you be able to handle that? And yeah, I kind of just ranted. Like, I don't really know where I was going, but I was
letting you go. I was letting you go. I think there's a couple of things. I mean, you said a lot of truth there, though, too. I mean, there's a reason why Ben McCollum was one of the most respected X's and O's coaches across college basketball, any level. You had high major D1 coaches calling him about how to run certain things or why he runs certain things. Like, this is a guy that was very respected in the circles. So I agree with you. I think, with all due respect, Fran McCaffrey, they were so offensive oriented, and I'm not even saying that's a bad thing, but they only won in that way, right? Like maybe they pick up 1 or 2 big wins a year, but I'll tell you, their defense ramped up because their offense was so bad, right? And it was one of those things to where you're not going to see as frequent of a 10-0 run in a minute and a half. They already cut into your 20-point lead. Like, how safe was a 20-point lead over the past few years? Like, it never felt like Iowa really secured a game until like the final 4 minutes when they were up 20 at most, because teams were able to get into it so fast because Iowa would get out of their game plan or they'd stick to it too much. They would continue to launch threes. You're right. From an X's and O's and schematic standpoint, this team is very well equipped. At some point, size does matter. I think Cam adding on an additional 20 pounds, I think they officially listed. I don't know if I completely buy that yet, but you can tell there's certain guys that have completely kind of rejuvenated or revamped their body. I mean, Cooper Koch looks noticeably stronger than he was last year. He's one of those X factor guys about how much time is he going to get. Trey Thompson, how much time is he going to get, because they wanted another body? But that's a guy who's ceiling, who you know better than I do covering his recruitment. This is a guy that the staff was very, very excited about. They are very excited about his future potential. I love that he's going to be able to learn from Fulgaris, because I think they're similar in some ways, but I also think they're different. But from a schematic standpoint, the one thing, there's two things that you'll see from Iowa. And Ben McCollum does not play guys who don't do these two things. Defense and rebounding. Like, I got texts from 3 different people in college basketball circles, Sean, right when they were going through all the coaching search. One of them was a former player of Ben, and 2 were former colleagues of Ben or a coach in the coaching circles. They said, and I quote, "If you don't play defense, you don't play in Ben McCollum's system." I'm not saying every guy's a lockdown guy. I'm not saying that they're going to be the best defensive team ever. They're going to be significantly better, but there's 2 things. They're going to be able to run the system, and they're going to give full effort. So I think you can kind of hang your hat on those 2 things. So when you look at the way the Big Ten is schemed up right now, that's where it's going to be very interesting. And I can't remember who asked this question. I know I asked it to Ben McCollum during my one-on-one with him. It was, does he more so play his style of ball, or does he adjust based on what opposing teams are going to throw at him? And I think and he basically said he has a healthy balance. Like, he does want to continue to implement things to throw off teams so they don't get too comfortable. But it also goes back to what Ben McCollum said in his opening press conference, Sean. He wants his teams to impose their will on the opponent. They want to suffocate them. They want to take smart shots. They want to rebound. They want to play with effort. And they're going to defend their tail off. And I think the one thing that you need when you play a system like that is Bennett Sturtz. Like, the one thing that popped off on film outside of his efficiency, Sean, is Bennett Sturtz does not get rushed or slowed down. He plays the pace he wants to play. And he might do that better than anybody in college basketball that I've seen. You could throw in a couple others, but Bennett Sturtz is so comfortable with his style of play. And it really is impressive. I know he's a mature guy. He's played a lot of basketball. But that's something that's so hard to teach if you get the wrong formula or the wrong coaching instilled in you from a young age. He just seems to get it.
Yeah, let's go back to the schedule a little bit. Looking at the Big Ten schedule, I'll have full takeaways later tonight on HawkeyeInsider.com. But here are kind of how I split up each game right now. So for the wins for this Iowa team, I have at home against Maryland, on the road at Minnesota, at home against Rutgers, at home against USC, at home against Northwestern, at home against Nebraska, at home against Ohio State, on the road at Penn State. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8 wins that I have okay, those should be sure wins. Toss-ups, I have 9 toss-up games. So UCLA, Illinois, at IU, at Oregon, at Washington, at Maryland, at Wisconsin, Michigan at home, then at Nebraska. And then I have 3 those should be losses. Michigan State, at Purdue, then Purdue home. But I mean, you could probably put Purdue at home as a toss-up game, because that's obviously depends what the home crowd is like and how we kind of see this team. But yeah, I mean, it just feels like there's a lot of opportunity for this Iowa team. It's just a matter of, okay, they're going to be coached right. They're going to be put in a position to win games and to excel. It's just a matter of, how do they match up? against some of these other, teams that also pretty amped up, like are pretty, strong teams in terms of like, okay, this is a step up in talent, a step up in competition, step up in depth, step up in the talent, athleticism. Because you look at this Big Ten conference as a whole. I think last year was like so incredibly deep that like people kind of didn't really appreciate it. Like every game was pretty much a dogfight. I think it's pretty top heavy this year, like in terms of, okay, I see Purdue, I see Michigan, I see UCLA, Illinois, maybe. Those are kind of my 4 right now.
Okay.
But I just think like the depth of the conference is like just a step up from outside of like if you're Minnesota or Penn State or, Northwestern will be fine, but I'm not really. I mean, Rutgers will be okay. I just like those are probably the 4 teams.
Eickholt needs a decent year.
Yeah,
I know,
but I mean those. But I think 14 teams in the Big Ten could really beat up on each other like any day. But really, I think the bottom 4 teams like could do the same But I think there are 14 teams that are like, okay, these are NCAA tournament type teams. And last year it probably was around like 12, 10. This year it's around 14, maybe even 15. I mean, who knows who could emerge and whatnot. But I think looking at the rotations, looking at the lineups, looking at the teams, like I just think the increase in talent is there too. Like it just feels like there's a lot more depth on each team from a talent perspective this year in the Big Ten. Do we want to talk about the non-con too, or
we can say that for a preview pod? We'll put that out. I know you're going to be at Big Ten Media Days next month, and I mean the basketball coverage is going to ramp up significantly here, probably within the next 3 weeks or so, because we'll do a preview to Big Ten Media Days and everything. Obviously, football's at the forefront, but it'll be interesting. I know you have a couple articles up on the non-con schedule. You had your top 5 most intriguing matchups. One up there as well.
Yeah, I did a top 5 most intriguing matchups, which I mean, from what I was told, I was definitely like content with their non-con schedule. But I think in an ideal world, they may want to try and, take that up a notch in the next couple of years. But I still think there's pretty challenging games in there. And there's some pretty good mid-major teams too. I mean, you look at Grand Canyon, they should be at the top or near the top of the Mountain West this year. And then who some of the other ones are coming to mind that I'm blanking on that are supposed to be like top towards the Robert Morris will be decent. Like I know they lose a lot, but I still think they should be pretty good in the Horizon League.
It'll be fun for Fulgaris too, playing against his whole team in his first game.
Yeah, I mean he's only got like 4 teammates that are still on the team. So
yeah, I mean their whole team, their whole starting 5, I think, right? Yeah.
But I did a story on the site about that, and I'll have some takeaways tonight too. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and we'll keep everybody updated. I think we're tossing around the idea of doing a live stream tomorrow following the Iowa Rutgers game, since we're not traveling out there, and obviously that's a critical game. But I mean the excitement for men's basketball, it's kind of, I don't want to say unparalleled, Sean, but like you could tell like ever since McCollum got hired, like there's a very renewed kind of energy and kind of interest around what's going to go on with the basketball program. But I think McCollum being an Iowa guy and probably doing all of the right things early on has significantly helped that. And now it just comes to a point where, is he going to win games? Because that's ultimately going to put butts back in seats, right? Well, that and probably playing defense and competing against the best and having a shot at upsetting, a Purdue, some of those other schools that end up coming to Iowa. So, for David Eickholt, Sean Bock, be sure to follow us on Twitter at David Eickholt, at SBock247, and go to HawkeyeInsider.com. We're going to have a lot more takeaways here over the next several days, several hours, and, of course, Iowa at Rutgers tomorrow. Appreciate everybody tuning in. This will be up later on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and everything else in case you missed any part of it. You want to re-listen to it. And we'll talk soon. Thanks.